I would like to welcome all of you. I presume many of you are faculty and students from Karnataka University and around. So thank you very much for coming. Uh, Hiranmay, it was wonderful to hear and from you about the vision of Chhatra Niti Aayog, and what better than having one of the most accomplished members of the scientific community in India, and who's also heading Niti Aayog's intellectual capabilities, Dr. V.K. Saraswat being here, giving direct guidance for students to take up policy making. So Niti Aayog, the whole concept, as you know, has been started to basically involve, have a more collaborative, more discursive, more informed policy making. And I think that's a very important point of departure from the traditional way in which policies would be made. Like we have seen a new way of thinking and the current way of thinking, and being involved in academia, being involved in policy making on the periphery at that time. My observation, and most of those who are in academic world, our observation is that policy making would be driven or be determined by all kinds of people, except, as rightly said by Hiranmay, and as we were chatting just before coming here with Dr. Saraswat and the others, except those who are affected by it, except those who really it impacts. So therefore, that process of coming up with a very informed decision making is very important to set up, and that's kind of a sea change we are observing, but it's still a long way to go because of the part dependency and the historicity of how things have been happening over the past few decades. So, I mean, my experience would be that policy making would be determined by think tanks who really don't think for themselves many of the times. I don't know if you have had experience with that, but many of the think tanks, they think what their support base or who fund or who promote them, they think. We know, there is a lot of bias in that kind of an approach. Many of the think tanks also have, links or are driven by global, forces, by global ideology, which may be good in their intent, but fail to take information from the ground in the society where the implementation has to be done. Or, the access to good quality science would be missing, or if not missing, then it would not be taken seriously. I'll just give a short, my personal experience in the recent times, where, we have been involved with some very important food and health related policy. So we did a very detailed study, and it was a consumer study because that policy will be impacting consumers, especially adolescents, and it leads to the whole idea is to drive more healthy food consumption and food behavior. So what we were asked by the current government is to come up with a very strong, robust scientific study which will inform on how this policy will play out to the consumers who are going to be impacted, which is the Indian consumers. But lo and behold, what happened is that when we did this study, lot of forces, a lot of activities or activists started coming and saying that, well, we don't think this insight can be taken because these policies worked in different ways in different countries: Australia, Chile, Israel, Europe. So there was a huge push towards promoting or towards taking insights from studies which have not happened in our context. Why? Because there is not enough capacity, probably, or not enough interactions with people who have capacity to do robust scientific studies which are done for the context in which the policies will be operating. So And very recently, there was an interaction where we were invited. I was invited to present, that study with a stakeholder group, and a very interesting criticism was made about the kind of sampling we had done. Just give an example, because you all are students. You all are students of science, so you will understand, how these methodological issues. So they said that, well, you have not represented the population in its ideal manner. So for example, you have taken your sample, which is not representative of how the rural and urban population exists. And there was a lot of newspaper advocacy, policy advocacy. Many organizations came together and picked those points and said that somehow this study is flawed. Now, when I made a presentation in front of the stakeholders and I explained the scientific methodology, it was very clear that the sampling method which we had adopted was absolutely robust, because we had taken the sample of consumers of that particular commodity and then split the sample, which makes it absolutely acceptable by international standards, and that's how science is done. Now, once they listened and understood that, then the whole the view changed. But before coming to that platform, there are a lot of vested interests which try to promote a non-scientific view, right? So we have to be very careful in trying to create a system which is very robust, which works with scientists, with with all kinds of policy informed researchers in our context, and stand together and value science rather than value those who make lot of noise, because we don't know where that is coming from. Probably those are coming from lot of vested interests. So that makes the new context of policy making very interesting, very important. And we are, at least personally, I am seeing a new dawn, a new way of thinking. But let us be careful that there will be a lot of challenges in that. And where does the buck finally stop? The buck finally stops with researchers, with policymakers who can identify and value research, and young brains, as Hiranmay rightly said, that all of you, most of you in this group who are students, are the ones who are going to, give this input, become the feedstock for good policy design in the future. For that, you have to be aware. For that, you have to know the policy making process. You have to understand and, deal with science. There will be a lot of force. Sometimes it will be through money. Sometimes it will be through, pseudo political powers or other kind of tensions. But one should stand, very strongly on information, on data, on method, on robust science. And that is the biggest responsibility which all of you have. And I think that's, one of the pillars which will make Chhatra Niti Aayog a force or a name to reckon with. And I really hope that it creates an impact where all of you come together, think about policy, but also involve yourself with policy making, with the methodological issues, right? Because globally we have experience where many, contexts we see, they take scientists' view very, very, very seriously. And that is what we are seeing now, happening, or there is a clear ask, a demand for that. So there could not be a better time for all of you to be participating. There could not be a better time to have Chhatra Niti Aayog, and there could not be better people to guide it than those who are actually, shaping the way the country is thinking, which starts with, Dr. Saraswat himself here. So with this, I'd really like to thank you and encourage you to participate in such, in such associations, but with a very strong commitment to serious science, right? And let's not compromise on that, because whatever happens at the end, truth will prevail and it will win. And that's our, faith and belief with which we should proceed. Thank you very much. Thank you again for inviting me.